moltes altres coses que parlarem avui. Farem la conversa en anglès amb el Jordan i jo i tindrem una traducció i interpretació que no serà literal però que podem anar per no fer-ho massa farragós. No traduirem frase a frase, però I was thanking.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that what you just said, I understood. So I don't speak Catalan, but I understood you. So
well, the thing is that Jordan speaks so many languages and has so many cultures embedded that he can relate to us.
Telepathy.
Yeah, telepathy, and we go to the same hairdressers and same barbershop, and we have many things in common with him. Although I'm not as successful or influential as he is, but we have same age, same generation. We both started very young in computers. I'm a computer science engineer, and I also write and talk and teach.
But now you're speaking English. Did everybody understand?
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. Maybe. Does everybody understand? Well,
this is great. Everybody understands all languages.
I probably understand my English because it's a Catalan English. But anyway, so reading the book, I related to many parts of the story. First of all, let me ask you a question. Who has read the book here? Nobody? Okay. 1, 2. Who has read 2, 3? Okay. Who has played Prince of Persia? Everybody. Okay. We'll talk about this also. Now, and have so many questions, and I want to start by one. I think the book is a kind of odyssey, like many odysseys in one. Many travels from Europe to America and back and forth across like 3 generations. And it's very well narrated. It's very well drawn. It's very well interwoven. It's not sequential narratives. It's flashbacks and flashbacks inside flashbacks, but you never get lost. It's beautifully narrated. Let me ask you this straight. You're known for your video games and for your movies, participation in movies, and but you started as a drawing. You started drawing as a drawer, a designer. Is this kind of a like revenge? Is it kind of a setting an old score? And finally, I got to do it.
Yeah. And first of all, is this really okay? Did everybody understand this in English? Yeah.
We did.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, in a way, for me, it was like a closing of a circle. Because when I was a kid, before the Apple II computer came and before I started playing or making video games, I wanted to be a cartoonist. Did you have Mad Magazine here?
Here? Do we have Mad here? No, we don't have Mad Magazine.
Yeah.
You have similar things to Mad.
Satirical.
Yeah.
Satirical magazine. So when I was 9-10 years old, my dream was to be a Mad Magazine cartoonist. And I think if the Apple II computer and Space Invaders hadn't come along when they did, maybe I would have continued on that path. But, I started making games on the computer, and I did that for 30, 40 years. And so now, to draw a graphic novel, I think in a way it's coming back to where I started.
There's someone who needs me to translate. Si diu que per ell és com... sí que implica una certa forma de tancar el cercle, no? Perquè quan ell era més jove, la seva primera vocació va ser dibuixant, però que mira que just en la seva vida va aparèixer l'Apple II i va canviar els plans, no? De fet, ell havia estat un gran lector de la revista Mad Magazine, que és una revista molt coneguda als Estats Units, però que aquí no l'hem tinguda, i que era justament la influència d'aquesta revista el que feia que ell volgués ser un dibuixant. Però, bueno, si l'Apple II no s'hagués acabat en el seu camí, potser hagués seguit amb aquest camí de ser dibuixant i que ara sí, que això en el seu moment actual és com tornant, no?, als seus orígens.
Yeah, it shows. And it shows because you draw yourself, and you draw yourself drawing, and you draw yourself designing and rotoscoping and creating video games, I'm getting inspired. Let's go back and start at the beginning. How does this idea come up, or it was only natural that with all the good material you had, you would end up doing the life of the story of your family, the memories of your family?
Yeah, well, the idea to do an autobiographical comic book came little by little. I'd been sort of thinking of it in the back of my mind, but I thought at first that it would have to be 3 books. One book to tell my story of making games in the 80s, being a kid with the early computers. A second book to tell the story of my dad as a child refugee in occupied France in World War II, because that's a completely different story. And then I thought it would be cool to do a book of my grandfather's story, because my grandfather, do you want to translate the first part?
Finish with the third book.
Okay, finish, yeah. My grandfather, when he retired as a doctor in Brooklyn, in the 70s, just at the time that I was a kid with my first Apple II computer, he spent 3 years of his retirement writing a memoir, a big family memoir of his memories of growing up in Czernowitz, in the old Austro-Hungarian Empire in the early part of the 20th century, and then being a soldier in the war of in World War I and a refugee in World War II. So I thought my grandfather's life, his memoir, is a book. And it took me, I was sort of struggling with it though, because when I started to try to figure out how to tell this story, it's like, how is this going to work with somebody reading my grandfather's story as a graphic novel? Because they'll say, who is this guy telling the story? Why should I believe it? Is it just a story? And, but I didn't see how I could make the 3 stories work together for a long time. I struggled. I tried many different ways to make it fit together. And what made it click into place was when I realized that by moving to France, because I moved from Los Angeles to Montpellier, France, 8 years ago for a video game project to make a new Prince of Persia game with a studio there in France. I realized that by doing that and taking my 2 American kids with me, I had done essentially the opposite, the mirror image of what my grandparents had done in 1938 when they fled from Nazi-occupied Austria across France to get to America with their 2 kids. So completely opposite, different situation from, they lived through the worst thing that anyone could live through, war and upheaval. And I was making the move in the best professional, creative situation. But still, it was a mirror image of that trip. So that gave me the title, Replay, and the structure of the book, which was to juxtapose my moving from America to become European again with the previous generation's journey from Europe to become American.
Well, quite long.
Yeah, I offered to pause.
Bé, la pregunta era com li va sorgir la idea de dibuixar aquesta novel·la gràfica, i ell diu que, bueno, que aquesta novel·la gràfica de contingut autobiogràfic, bueno, es va anar construint a poc, que era una cosa com que tenia això com es diu una arrière-pensée, no? On al fons que tenia allò pendent, treballant i tal, i quan es va pensar en fer-ho, de fet la idea que tenia era de fer 3 llibres, no? Un primer que aniria sobre els anys 80, quan ell era jove i quan era, de fet, molt jovenet i que s'estava dedicant a fer videojocs. Un segon que aniria sobre el seu pare, que va ser un refugiat a França durant la Segona Guerra Mundial, i un tercer que aniria sobre el seu avi, que quan era un metge ja retirat, ja jubilat, i vivia a Brooklyn, va dedicar 3 anys de la seva jubilació a escriure una mena de memòries molt extenses i grans sobre la història de la seva família, no? En l'imperi, ell va néixer a una ciutat de l'imperi austro-húngar, que després va ser soldat a la Primera Guerra Mundial, va ser refugiat a la Segona Guerra Mundial, i bé, ell amb aquestes 3 idees del llibre al cap les tenia clares però no sabia com ajuntar-les, no? Les tenia clares per separat però no sabia com ajuntar-les, i es va haver de barallar bastant a veure com com ho feia, perquè tampoc veia clar fer un llibre sobre el seu avi, perquè la gent es preguntaria, i qui és aquest home? I per què m'interessa a mi la història d'aquest senyor que no conec res? I llavors va pensar en com les havia d'ajuntar, però no ho trobava. I un dia va tenir un clic, li va fer un clic, que era quan ell és nord-americà i viu a França, a Montpellier, i quan s'estava traslladant de Los Angeles a Montpellier per treballar en un projecte de videojocs, el Prince of Persia 2, crec, amb els seus 2 fills, se'n va adonar que en el fons estava fent una cosa molt semblant a la que va fer el seu avi, però a la inversa, no? Ell deixava els Estats Units per anar a Europa amb els seus 2 fills i el seu avi va deixar a Europa per anar als Estats Units amb els seus 2 fills, però un fugia de la guerra i l'altre ho feia com a professional. I va ser aquí quan es va adonar de la relació i li va venir el títol de l'obra, Replay, i també l'estructura, no? D'un viatge dels Estats Units a Europa i a la inversa, un viatge d'Europa als Estats Units. O sigui, tu deixar de ser americà per convertir-te en europeu i deixar de ser europeu per convertir-te en americà.
How do you do it? How do you write?
She's taking notes.
I know, but it's amazing.
Thank you.
Wow. So this brings me to another point. Is like you came from a European, Jewish European origin, and you grew up in New York, and then you went to Los Angeles, San Francisco, Los Angeles. Were you different in the sense that you were kind of from a family of European heritage, growing up in America, kind of off-topic American, so to speak. And when you came to France, and it shows in your book, sometimes, many times, you speak about French bureaucracy that not even French people understand, and your sons suffer bureaucracy. And here you're kind of a off European, like an American European. How is this mixed origins or background play in the US when you were growing up, or in Europe now?
Yeah, and as you say, that it's one of the themes of the book, really, being a foreigner someplace. I think I always felt a little bit like an outsider, even though I was born in New York and grew up there. I don't know if it was because my family was European. My dad spoke with an accent, Viennese accent, or maybe because we were Jewish, or maybe because I liked comics and video games and science fiction, which wasn't so much in the mainstream in the 70s. Or maybe it's just that being a kid, it's normal to feel like you're different and that everybody else somehow shares this culture and you're like a little bit odd. But anyway, I always felt that way. And so one reason I feel so comfortable in Europe and in France is because I have a reason to feel like a foreigner.
Yeah,
it's like I'm not French. So it's.
Bueno, la pregunta era com el Jordan Mechner pot viure amb aquesta dualitat, no? Que, de ser de formar part d'una família d'origen jueu a Nova York, si se sentia fora d'ambient justament per venir d'una família europea, no? Als Estats Units, i a la vegada si també se sent una mica com un estranger a Europa justament per venir dels Estats Units, com conviu amb aquesta realitat, no? I en Jordan Mechner respon que sí, que de fet aquest és un dels temes del llibre, no? Sentir-se un estranger, un desarrelat, no? Però que de fet ell sempre s'ha sentit un outsider, no? Que sempre s'ha sentit una mica fora de lloc, perquè la seva família era europea als Estats Units, per l'accent del seu pare, que tenia un accent europeu molt fort, per ser jueus, per ell en concret per fer videojocs, que diguem-ne que no era precisament una cosa molt mainstream, sinó que era molt minoritària, sobretot més encara en l'època en què ell va començar, als anys 70 i 80, i que a més, sent un nen, és bastant normal que et sentis diferent. I que, de fet, una de les raons per les quals se sent tan còmode a França és perquè allà sí que té realment una raó per sentir-se estranger, perquè en realitat ho és.
Yeah, and so I think the deeper answer to what you asked is that, because why would I feel comfortable being a foreigner? Because it would also make sense to want to fit in, to want to be like everyone else. But I think now, and this is something that I realized more in doing this book, in doing Replay, that maybe there is a kind of a heritage of this, it's almost like a family tradition of being exiles, of coming from somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe because for so many generations, we've come from somewhere. Even my grandfather in Vienna had come from Czernowitz. So in a way, the world of his childhood had already changed and disappeared, even by the 1930s. Maybe it's just in the blood, and it feels normal to me. So I'm comfortable being uncomfortable.
Sí, de fet, ell creu que encara hi ha un nivell més profund en aquesta pregunta, que és per què se sent còmode, no? Sentint-se desarrelat, quan de fet tothom el que vol és tenir un sentiment de pertinença. I diu que creu que és perquè en la seva família hi ha una herència, no? Una herència familiar en certa mesura d'estar exiliat, no? Que és la tradició familiar, ho va ser el seu avi, ho va ser el seu pare i també ho ha estat ell, no? Fins i tot que en el cas del seu avi, fins i tot la ciutat de l'imperi austro-húngar, Czernowitz, perdó, que no la pronuncio bé, en què ell havia nascut i havia viscut a la dècada dels anys 30, de fet, amb totes les convulsions polítiques, ja havia desaparegut, no? I això, bueno, doncs es porta a la sang, aquest sentiment.
One thing that I found very interesting is your granddad documenting everything when he flees to La Habana and writing everything and keeping all memories. Your dad doing the same, and you at some point doing the same, researching the lost book, or I think it was the page, I can't remember, a tome in the memories that finally you found it. And I was paying attention at the different technologies that everybody used. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for technology. You wouldn't have written this book if you weren't for that Apple II computer that you got. What was it for Christmas?
Well, I wish.
No, it wasn't for Christmas. The Apple II.
No, I saved up my pocket money.
That's right.
That I got from drawing cartoons.
Yeah. It's in the book. Sorry. It's in the book. It's in the book. I remember now.
No, you should have suggested that to my parents. That would have made sense.
I'm not that old. No. Now, what I want you to tell us is how the different technologies played. I noticed that when you talk about the memories or the memories that your granddad wrote, it's like a typewriter type, and then your dad kept the memories and wrote his memories, and then you researched the whole family archive. And how did different technologies play along your family story?
So this memoir that I mentioned that my grandfather wrote, this was in 1975 to 1978. So he typed it on a manual typewriter using two fingers because he never learned to touch type. And so somehow he was doing this in English, which is not his native language. So it took him 3 years, but he typed almost 1,000 pages of everything that he remembered. But one important difference, he did this towards the end of his life. He was a doctor, and he didn't want to retire. It took a heart attack and getting mugged, and so when he finally, the family forced him to retire. And so, okay, what's he going to do with this? He started to write this book. He was hoping that he would live long enough to finish the book, and he did. He lived several years longer. But so it's really him looking back on a life, and he didn't. I think because he was a refugee, because he came to the United States with just a suitcase, and lost everything. Everything that all the photo albums and the furniture, and of course then the medical profession, the friends, the network, that he had back in Vienna, all of that was gone. He had to start over in a new country with nothing. So I think for him, this was a way to save what had, to recapture what had disappeared, so that he could at least pass the knowledge of that on to the next generation. You want to translate that part?
Vale. En Josep Maria Ganyà li ha preguntat quin paper han jugat les diferents tecnologies que han emprat els tres personatges principals d'aquesta obra per explicar la seva història. I en Jordan Mechner comenta que, de fet, les memòries del seu avi, que les va escriure entre 1975 i 1978, les va escriure a màquina amb 2 dits, així a l'antiga, perquè no va aprendre taquigrafia i que a més ho havia fet en anglès, que no era la seva llengua materna. I són unes memòries molt, molt extenses. El seu avi era doctor i no volia jubilar-se, ho va fer durant la jubilació i es va jubilar obligat per la família. Llavors el seu avi estava molt capficat que volia viure el suficient per poder acabar aquestes memòries. I per què creu que les va escriure? Doncs bé, perquè el seu avi era un refugiat que havia arribat als Estats Units, com es diu, con lo puesto, no? Amb una maleta només. I això significa que ho havia perdut tot, doncs la seva professió en el seu país d'origen, a Àustria, els seus amics, les fotografies, els mobles, i es va trobar allà que havia de començar de zero. I en Jordan Mechner això ho interpreta, aquesta voluntat de fer les memòries, com l'intent del seu avi per salvar aquest passat per la seva família i d'una forma de recuperar tot allò que es va perdre quan va haver de fugir d'Europa.
So this was the first generation, and then my dad's situation was different because he was a kid. He was 12 years old when he came to America. So, he had a normal life there. He had, all of the photos of when we were kids. So I grew up in a house which had, photo albums and Super 8 movies, and all of these souvenirs of the 1960s and 70s. But I think what my dad transmitted to me, maybe unconsciously, was just this sense that these souvenirs were precious. When I was a kid and I would draw, my drawings on crayons, my comic books, and then I would be going to throw it away. My dad would say, no, save this. This could be This could be incredibly valuable to you 30 years from now. And so where did that come from? I think it must have come from his being a child of refugees, that because he had so few souvenirs of his own childhood that he wanted to keep ours. So somehow this got probably transmitted to me, because when I was in college, when I was about, 17, 18 years old, I started to keep a journal, which is a little bit unusual. Not everybody did that, but it was actually my college roommate kept a journal, and I saw that and I was like, oh, I want to do that too. And I started keeping a journal. I started writing in notebooks at the end of every day, and I actually kept up that habit ever since. I still keep a journal.
Wow.
Yeah, but I'm the first in my family to do that. My dad, my grandfather, they didn't keep journals. They reconstructed the story from their memories. But when I, well, not only did I keep a journal, but if there's some Prince of Persia fans here who went so far as to get this book of my journals, The Making of Prince of Persia, that when I was in college, when I was making my games on the Apple II, I was writing in my journal at the end of every day, and then I actually published them as a book. So again, I think it's this sort of, I think what's consistent is the respect for the past, the feeling that the past is worth preserving. But the technology has evolved. And one of the things in Replay that visually, was fun for me is to show how, like, the keyboard, that my grandfather typed on, the typewriter turns into an Apple II, which, the Apple II keyboard, which then turns into a modern laptop. So in all of the different timelines, there's still a keyboard, and but it's really the same thing. It makes a visual connection.
Which goes back to print, to paper.
Which goes back to a book. Pen on paper, which is the oldest technology of all.
Bueno, la situació del seu pare era diferent, perquè va arribar amb 12 anys als Estats Units, bueno, va tenir una vida més normal, amb fotografies familiars, però bueno, el seu pare d'una forma o altra li va transmetre al Jordan, fins i tot, suposo que de forma inconscient, aquesta idea de que els records són preciosos, no en el sentit de bonic, sinó de valor, no? Del valor que tenen. De fet, el seu pare, quan ell era petit i dibuixava coses, i bueno, llavors ho llenço, el seu pare no li deixava fer-ho, li deia que ho guardés perquè això podia ser material preciós en el futur d'aquí 30 anys. Ell, de fet, el Jordan va començar a escriure un diari quan tenia 17, 18 anys, cosa que no era gaire normal a l'època. I, de fet, encara avui dia el manté, segueix escrivint aquest diari. I és el primer de la seva família en què ha escrit un diari personal. El seu pare i el seu avi, tots els records els recuperen, doncs això, de memòria. De fet, ell té uns diaris que va escriure, bueno, que estan escrits cada dia mentre estava creant Prince of Persia a la seva època dels 17-18 anys, i escrivia cada dia i estan editats i hi ha gent que fins i tot els té i que ahir van dur-los perquè els signés. I, en el fons, el que li van inculcar és aquesta idea, el que hi ha és aquesta idea de que s'ha de respectar el passat, no? Que el passat és patrimoni, encara que la tecnologia en el que l'acabem reflectint i conservant hagi anat canviant amb el pas del temps. De fet, és molt divertit veure com amb la seva obra hi ha present, no, un teclat, ja sigui el de la màquina d'escriure del seu avi, el de l'Apple II, o que ara es puguin fer les coses amb un laptop molt modern, però que el teclat està allà i el Jean-Marie Gagnet ha comentat i que, mira, vam partir del paper, no?, amb les memòries amb la màquina d'escriure i hem tornat al paper amb Replay, amb el llibre imprès.
Sí, it's fantastic. Do you keep everything when you go to a concert? There's the movies or the cinema. Do you keep all the tickets?
No, it's...
I'm
not a hoarder. What's the Spanish word for hoarder?
Hoarder, síndrome de Diógenes.
Yeah. Oh, it's always a question.
You are or no?
No, I'm not.
I am.
Yeah. No, and in fact, one episode in the book, when I moved from Los Angeles to France, I went from like a big California house with a garage with boxes of everything to a little apartment in Montpellier. So for me, this was a chance to get rid of 90% of my stuff. So it's, I mean, we're in a bookstore.
It reminds me of my garage.
Yeah. So it's, I try to curate as I go, to keep, because you end up with too much stuff. Who's going to look through it, right?
Yeah.
One of the pleasures for me of doing Replay was to take all of these boxes, photo albums and this huge memoir and come up with something that's compact, that's only 300 pages that I can hold in my hand. But of course, I left a lot out.
Bé, a Jean-Marie Gagnet li ha preguntat si ell ho guarda tot, no? Les entrades al cinema, etc. I en Jordan MECHNER ha dit que no té síndrome de Diògenes. Jean-Marie Gagnet ha dit que ell sí. De fet, Jordan MECHNER, quan va haver de traslladar-se de Los Angeles a França, o sigui, d'una casa a Califòrnia, molt gran, molt espaiosa, a un petit apartament, un petit piset a Montpellier, va haver de desfer-se del 90% de les seves coses, no? Perquè, evidentment, no les podia traslladar. I tot i que és important mantenir records, és cert que ell tria molt el que conserva. I, de fet, una de les coses divertides d'haver fet Replay és haver pogut posar tantes coses en un llibre de 300 pàgines, d'haver-ho pogut encarregar.
Although I have to add something, which is that if I had known how much old video games from the 80s would sell for on eBay, I would have kept them.
Yes. We talked about the idea of writing the book and your sources, and I think it was life led you there. I mean, you couldn't do otherwise. I want to know about the process. I mean, the process of documenting, organizing everything. You scanned everything. You published some material on the web. It's available. And from this, I want to know about the whole process, how you started. I mean, documenting, researching, then organizing, and then discarding some material, and then organizing the stories not in a linear way. Then I guess writing and drawing. Tell me about the whole process. What was harder? What took you more time?
Yeah, for replay.
Yeah, for replay.
Yeah. So I had this great memoir of my grandfather, which of course I read it, and as I describe in replay, because he did it in the 70s, and this was 40 years later, it was really hard to get that original memoir back together, because these were pages with photos glued, color photos glued to them, and like at different times people had taken the photos like to scan them. My mom had made Xerox, like 10 Xerox copies of this memoir, like in 1980, so that everybody in the family could have one. But the Xerox copies, you couldn't see the photos anymore. It just turned to, you couldn't read them. So I actually thought it would be good to put this autobiography, this memoir, online, make a website, a WordPress website, so that at least can send the link to everyone in the family. My dad can read it. If anybody's curious, they can look it up. This turned out to be such a project. It took years to scan the pages and to find the original pages, and so many of the photos were lost. So I put this, this project in the story, because it sort of fit with the themes of the book. But of course, the photographs that my grandfather saved were precious references, because like for drawing my great grandparents in Vienna, who I never met, or for drawing the house in Vienna, there were so many things that I had been told as a kid that I sort of had a vague mental image of, but when I had to do the page, I realized I had no idea how to draw these things. What did the inside of my dad's apartment look like in Vienna? There is no photograph of that anywhere. So I had to try to find photographs of other houses of similar families in Vienna at that time. And this was, for everything, even there's only one photograph of the office that I had at Broderbund when I was making Prince of Persia. At the end of the development, I had a friend take one picture of me in front of the Apple II. That's the only one. For 3 years, I was making this game, never took a picture. So again, I had to try to, I went to the Facebook group. I called old colleagues from Broderbund, in case they took some picture. And then, here at the Broderbund 1986 Christmas holiday party, here's a photograph that shows things like that. I'll pause here so you can.
Bé, en Josep Maria Ganyet li ha preguntat pel procés, no?, de creació del llibre, documentació, organització, publicació al web, en general com ho havia fet amb els materials. I bé, en Jordan comenta que ell al principi de tot es va trobar amb aquestes grans memòries, no?, molt extenses del seu avi, feta durant els anys 40, i que després, 40 anys més tard, es va trobar amb com fer-ho amb aquell material, no? Hi havia fotografies de color, o sigui, eren pàgines en què hi havia fotografies de color, però algunes vegades s'havien tret, ja no s'havien tornat a enganxar, s'havien fet fotocòpies, les fotocòpies no hi havia, les fotos ja no eren de bona qualitat, i va decidir que buscaria els originals, els canejaria i els penjaria online en una pàgina web feta en WordPress i canviaria el link a aquesta pàgina a tots els membres de la família perquè poguessin tenir accés a aquestes memòries, però que aquest era un projecte gran, d'aquests complicats, perquè va haver de fer tota aquesta feina d'escanejar i de buscar els originals que fossin llegibles, i que tot aquest procés apareix explicat al llibre de Replay. I que, de fet, les fotos que es conserven de l'època del seu avi són referències molt valuoses, perquè ell, sabia moltes coses de l'època del seu avi que li havien explicat, i que havia de reconstruir a partir de la seva imaginació, però que tenir fotos dels seus avis a Viena i de la casa en què vivien, doncs, ha estat molt valuós. tot i que hi ha hagut coses que no sabia com dibuixar, com per exemple l'interior, no? I que va haver de buscar altres fotos, altres cases a la mateixa època per provar de poder documentar-se per reconstruir els interiors. I que fins i tot de la seva època de creació de Prince of Persia només té una fotografia de l'oficina, perquè la resta de fotos, de fet, són d'ell d'esquena treballant, que mai es va preocupar per fer fotos que documentessin en aquell procés i que es va haver de dedicar a buscar gent de l'època amb què s'havia creuat, amb qui s'havia relacionat, a veure si es conservaven fotos de diferents esdeveniments que relaten en el llibre.
Crec que he dit que no hi havia fotos de Viena, que dels interiors no tenia fotos.
No, dels interiors no, va haver de buscar, però dels seus avis, exacte, però dels seus avis a Viena sí.
Yeah, so this was one phase, was collecting references. And for some, there was family photos. For others, I just had to look online. I had to go to photo archives. I watched movies, some because there are so many films made in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and recent films where the costume designers and the set designers really did a great research job. So I used those, but again, with caution, because sometimes they got things wrong. So I also tried to find original sources, to find that, and it's amazing. You can find like newsreel footage of people walking in the street in 1908. It's, so collecting all of that was one part.
How long was that?
Well, I did everything in parallel. At a certain point, I was like, okay, there was. Do you want to translate this part and then I'll continue?
Yes. També vaig tot el tema de buscar les referències, no? Una de les coses que va fer, per exemple, va ser mirar pel·lícules, no? Per exemple, per documentar-se en qüestions de vestuari, però moltes de les pel·lícules eren posteriors a l'època que ell volia representar. En molts casos, les persones que havien fet les pel·lícules sí que s'havien documentat molt bé sobre aquests temes, però que igualment ell feia comprovacions i sempre intentava buscar les fonts originals perquè de vegades també hi havia errors en aquestes pel·lícules. I que tot aquest procés de creació i de documentació ho va fer en paral·lel, no un abans de l'altre.
Yeah. So, but already during this visual research phase, I was already starting to structure the story because I need to know more to draw a panel than to write it. Like I can easily say, it's a street in Vienna in 1915, and I don't need to worry about it. But when I draw that panel, then I say, okay, how were the people dressed? Did they have cars already, or was it still horses? And but for structuring it, the way I did it was I used Post-its. Do we say Post-its of 3 different colors. So for each story, for each timeline, I wrote down the main events, the episodes that I thought I would put in the book. So for my story, for instance, I wrote Space Invaders, first Apple II, college, starting to make karateka, things like that. And then the same for my dad's timeline, the 1938 Anschluss Hitler military parade under the apartment window. Okay, that I knew that would be there. Taking the train with his dad from Vienna to Paris in 1938. So I had a whole stack of Post-its for each timeline, and also for my grandfather's story in the 1900s, and also for my present day story, moving to France, to Montpellier. So 4 different timelines. And then I sort of laid the Post-its out in sequence, and I tried to find places where the stories would overlap or would be a pivot. So the one rule that I made for myself was that each timeline had to be chronological. That is, because I thought it's already a book which is telling these 4 timelines could be confusing for readers. And this color system, this the 3 suitcases with the 3 different colors, I thought would help to keep it clear.
It does.
But I thought if I started jumping around within the timelines, it would be over. So that's why, for example, the first page of the book shows, the book opens with the Anschluss in 1938. My dad is 7 years old. The Nazi procession underneath the window. They're going to have to leave. So the next thing that happens in that timeline has to be after that. So I found the places where, for example, my dad and he's 7 years old, and he and his dad leave Vienna. I put that with myself on a train as well, coming back from college, from university. So the train was the theme that unified the three panels on that page. And I looked for things like that. For example, a kid starting school, a kid changing schools, or being on a beach with the seagulls and the tide. So all kinds of, it could be a visual moment, or it could be like a stage in life, or a theme. Moved the Post-its around in sequence until I had a structure that would give me a chapter. And tell me if I should pause to.
Please.
Yeah.
Bueno, a veure, ell això, ho treballava tot en paral·lel i estructurava la història. I ell diu que, de fet, ell més que escriure el que necessitava era dibuixar-la, i que justament era quan la dibuixava que es preguntava per com havia de reflectir certs elements, com per exemple la vestimenta. I per l'estructuració, bueno, ell per fer-ho el que va agafar eren blocs de pòstits de 3 colors diferents i cada color era per una de les històries i en cada pòstit anotava elements claus, no? Com per exemple, en el cas de la història que fa referència a ell, doncs en un posava Space Invaders, en un altre el primer Apple II, en el cas de el seu pare, l'Anschluss o quan Hitler que fos, com les fites, fites en cadascun dels pòstits. Llavors, tenia tota una línia en la que estaven els pòstits de les diferents línies cronològiques i va mirar com les movia de forma que es poguessin estar explicant les 3 històries de forma paral·lela, però de forma comprensible pel lector i que estiguessin lligades entre elles. I, per exemple, una forma de fer-ho era buscar elements que les unifiquessin, com, per exemple, en el cas en què fa servir el tren, l'element del tren, per unificar tant la història del seu avi com la seva, o, per exemple, fa servir el paral·lelisme entre un infant que comença en escola i un altre que es veu obligat a canviar d'escola, o quan fa servir com a element unificador el mar i apareixen gavines a diferents històries. I aquests elements unificadors són els que ja siguin un moment de la vida o un tema o un element aglutinador, els que li serveixen per construir cada capítol de la història.
Molt bé. What's more fun, programming, creating a video game, or drawing, writing, and creating a book?
What's more fun?
Sorry.
Well, I think, in a way, whatever I'm engaged in, the one that I'm doing is the most fun, and also the one that I really, really want to be done with so that I can do the other thing that would be more fun. This is the rhythm, right? Of, I think any project, you alternate between energy. It's like, I'm so happy doing this. It's going so well. This is my favorite thing to be doing. To this, like, I'm getting nowhere. I'm wasting my time. I can't wait. I wish I were just done with this so that I could. And I think the rhythm of that was very similar when I was programming games on the Apple II. to when I was making games with a bigger team, for PlayStation, to drawing books. It's I think emotionally the roller coaster ride is kind of similar.
La pregunta era de què disfruta més fent, no? Què ha disfrutat més fent, si creant videojocs o creant aquesta novel·la gràfica. I la resposta és que sigui el que estic fent en un moment concret és allò més divertit que puc estar fent justament en aquell moment, no? És el que realment vull fer en aquell moment. L'energia que té fent les coses és aquesta, no? La d'estar disfrutant mentre les està fent. No de, ostres, potser hauria d'estar fent una altra cosa o ara que estic fent això. No, que faci el que faci, diguem-ne, que està disfrutant el moment de fer allò que està fent.
Okay, very good. Anem acabant, després hi ha preguntes, no? Okay, a couple of questions and then we'll let the audience talk or ask. In Prince of Persia, there was this moment where you wouldn't have any fights in the game, and there was a person that said, "No, we need swords. We need fights." Was there a moment or person that prompted you to put fights, whatever, or something that you weren't thinking about in this book, like a fight moment for the book? Was it there?
So, talking about the moment when my friend Tomi convinced me that I had to put sword fighting combat into Prince of Persia.
There were no fights.
Yeah, because my idea was that this would be a non-violent hero, like in the first 10 minutes of Indiana Jones, where he runs, he jumps, the spikes spring out of the wall, the giant ball is rolling after him, but he's just trying to stay alive. He's not trying to hurt anybody. So I wanted the game to be like that too. And I was already almost done with the game, more than 2 years into development, when my friend Tomi was saying, yeah, it's just not enough fun. You need to be able to, beat your enemies. You have to have some satisfaction, some triumph, as well as you can't make a whole game where the only fun is trying to stay alive. Was this we need translation? Or, yeah.
La pregunta era que en el cas de Prince of Persia no hi havia cap lluita en el joc i que li van dir que, escolta, que hauries de posar alguna lluita en el videojoc, no? I llavors li pregunta, perquè algú t'ha dit de posar alguna cosa a la novel·la gràfica que tu no tinguessis en ment fer-ho. I bé, en Jordan Mechner comenta que va ser el seu amic Tom qui li va dir que feia falta posar un element de lluita en el seu videojoc, però tot i que ell l'havia concebut en un inici com un videojoc no violent, no? I, clar, resulta que havia sortit el tema Indiana Jones al principi del videojoc, doncs sí, que hi ha una lluita, però que ell diu que ell no... L'Indiana Jones, de fet, no volia matar ningú, sinó que el que volia era una lluita per sobreviure. I que, clar, que ja portava 2 anys fent el Prince of Persia, que ja estava gairebé acabat i que li va venir el seu amic Tom dient-li, escolta, que has de posar una lluita perquè un cop, diguem-ne que el videojoc no es tracta només de sobreviure, que aquí hi ha d'haver algun tipus el jugador d'experimentar algun tipus de satisfacció.
Yeah, so the question was there a moment like this making Replay where I got feedback from someone else that made me change the book? So now, one limitation, of course, Prince of Persia is an adventure. It's fiction. So I had the right to put in guards or, fighting. But with Replay, I didn't want to do the Hollywood thing of making the story more exciting by inventing something. And I think if this were a movie screenplay, you can't escape it. At a certain point, the director or the studio will say, this German soldier who comes to the tobacco shop and their friends, it's like, why don't they fall in love? Maybe this should be a love story. That would be more exciting if she was actually in love with this German soldier. And in a movie, they would probably do that. I can't do that because, it's my Aunt Lisa, and that's not what happened. It was, they were friends, period. I can't invent something more exciting for the story that wasn't true.
Bé, i la pregunta és si a Ripley li havien proposat, no, de fer algun canvi, i diu, bueno, és que, clar, amb Ripley tinc una limitació important. Prince of Persia era una ficció i més o menys podia fer el que volia, però en el cas de Ripley no era així, no? O sigui, per exemple, amb l'episodi de la part de França en què va el soldat alemany a l'estanc, segurament si això hagués estat una pel·lícula, doncs li haguessin proposat als responsables de la pel·lícula, escolta, i per què no hi ha una història d'amor, no?, entre el soldat i la teva tieta? Però clar, això ell potser en una pel·lícula de cinema hauria passat, però en el cas de Ripley no podia fer-ho, no?, perquè és una obra autobiogràfica, està basada en fets reals i aquesta història d'amor, doncs resulta que no va succeir, no?, en la realitat.
Yeah. But there is a kind of a combat that was missing, and actually it was the people who knew me best. Yeah, some my best friends, and my brother, who, when they read the book, in a couple of places gave me the feedback of because the book also tells the story of a divorce, of my divorce from my second wife, and their feedback was, they wanted to put more marital combat, because the fear was, I think we don't really understand why you guys split up. It's too peaceful. I remember that it was tough. You were really going through a hard time, and we don't feel that. And also with my kids changing schools, the people who were closest to me then say, that was really a hard time for you. You were stressed. And in the book, you it just feels too easy. So I think I had been avoiding putting the things that were most recent and most painful for me. And I had to hear this from a few people before I would say, okay, I guess and I really had to kind of think back and check my notes about how these things had gone. And again, keeping a journal reminds you of things sometimes that you would rather have forgotten. And so those are really how can I put this make this scene like feel more so people will understand really what it felt like. And that's so I put in there's a few scenes that I put in late in the game to have more combat.
I guess we'll see that in the movie.
Diu que es va trobar amb això relatiu a les baralles matrimonials, no? Baralles maritals. I que li ve que dues persones que un amic seu, quan es van llegir el llibre, abans que es publiqués, li van dir que la història que ell va explicar al seu llibre del divorci amb la seva segona dona, que pel que llegien no entenien realment perquè s'havien divorciat, perquè de fet diuen que la seva part de trencament del matrimoni la troben com molt tranquil·la, no? Molt pacífica, i que ells recordaven que havia sigut una cosa bastant més conflictiva del que s'explicava en el llibre. I això a ell el va fer reflexionar i que potser resulta que el que estava fent era intentar evitar entrar en episodis de la seva vida que eren dolorosos i recents, no? I llavors el que va fer va ser agafar els seus diaris, que per això està bé tenir-los, els va estar revisant i es va trobar amb records d'aquells que potser t'hauria agradat més no tornar-hi i haver-te oblidat d'ells. I que es va estar plantejant com podia explicar això, i que va afegir dues escenes en el còmic perquè es reflectís aquesta època d'intensitat emocional amb els conflictes amb la parella.
And my last question is, there's a sentence that stuck with me, and it's when you're producing The Last Express, and you're in financial trouble, and you're discussing with your dad, playing a game of Go. And your dad tells you about the classical dilemma, entrepreneur's dilemma, and he says trying to translate, the will of taking risks is the price of freedom, something like that. I don't know how was in the original here. Do you remember?
La voluntad de asumir riesgos es el precio de la libertad. Yeah, the willingness to take risks is the price of freedom.
And then you pan to occupied France, not the occupied and the Pétains France.
Yeah. So this is this, you can hold up the page so people can see it. This is an example of using the color palette because this is a scene in the 1990s when I'm making The Last Express. I've spent all my money and I'm sort of gambling it to make this game.
Yeah.
And so I put this in a conversation with my dad in his apartment in New York while we're playing a game of Go. And of course, that's just a storytelling device. In reality, we played Go. We also, took walks. But I thought that having this conversation take place with the game of Go was a reflection of the subject because it's like he's a strategist. He's really good at Go, and so he's giving me advice on business strategy. And the last panel of the page goes back to the sepia to his. It jumps back from the 90s to his timeline. And at this point, his Aunt Lisa has decided to take the risk of leaving the place where they are to go to Paris, to go to Gestapo headquarters, as a young Jewish woman, to walk in and ask for a permit to go to the unoccupied zone. Basically, to go from a place where they're pretty safe to risk the possibility that she will go into the Gestapo headquarters and never come out in order to have this chance to go to the zone libre, which she thought would be safer. And so I put a map in that panel. So that this is, that's sort of the juxtaposition of, that's where the Post-its lined up. But this was, in fact, something that my dad advised. Do you want to translate that first part before I continue?
Yes. Maria Ganyet fa un comentari. Un mapa d'Europa amb colors, no? O sigui, la primera vinyeta és en blanc i negre i blau i la següent és amb uns colors vermells bastant marcats. I aquí en Jordan Mechner parla de com fa servir aquest ús expressiu i narratiu del color i aquesta conversa que té amb el seu pare, que ell mentre feia The Last Express es va, quedar sense tots els seus diners perquè ho havia invertit en això. I quan conversa amb el seu pare, aquesta conversa la tenen al pis del pare a Nova York, en què estan jugant a Go, que és un joc d'estratègia, i el seu pare, de fet, li està dient una estratègia també empresarial, no? Aquesta que ni comenta. I que la següent vinyeta fa un paral·lelisme amb el contingut de l'anterior, però també una contraposició amb la presentació d'aquest mapa i que és el moment en què la seva tieta Lisa decideix també prendre un risc, que és deixar a París per anar a la zona no ocupada, la del règim de Vichy, perquè creia que així tindria més oportunitats de poder sobreviure, amb el risc que deixant la zona ocupada després, perquè estava a la Gestapo, no pogués tornar. O sigui, està fent aquest paral·lelisme amb el contingut i també una contraposició amb el color.
Yeah. But this was very characteristic of my dad to say this. And I think this is the kind of advice that he gave me since I was a kid. I remember when I had made Karateka, the first version of Karateka. I was in college and I sent it to Broderbund and they wanted it. I think a lot of parents in 1984 would have said to their kid, so if this company is willing to hire you and pay you a good salary to make games, that's a great opportunity, because that was kind of like parents want their kids to get a job, to be paid. And Broderbund offered me a job as a programmer. And so And we're like, wow, to work for Broderbund, to get paid for doing what I love, for making games, that's great. And my dad said to me, why would you do that? If they're willing to pay you a salary to do this, that means that what you're doing for them is worth more. So do it for yourself. Then you own it.
Mhm.
And then make a contract for them to publish it when it's done. And that advice, I mean, it was good advice because, you know, the fact that with Karateka and with Prince of Persia, I took the position of being an author rather than an employee. As you can imagine, if you know the video game industry, that means that I kept the ownership, and I was able to then go on and work with Ubisoft to make The Sands of Time and with Disney to make the movie, and opened so many doors for me. And that actually goes back to advice that my dad gave me when I was still in college. So I think in his life, I mean, starting with what happened when he was 7 years old and had to flee his country, these events instilled a deep distrust of authority. You know, his instinct is always to try to keep the freedom and the power in your own life, so that you're not depending on somebody else who can say you can't do this, you can't do that, and make the decisions for you, because he doesn't trust that the decisions made by others will be good. And for whatever reason, I think I ended up kind of internalizing that as well.
Diu que a l'època en què ell era molt jovenet, no? Era molt típic en què un pare, bueno, ella es va trobar que el 1984, quan li van oferir que el contractaven i una companyia important li donava, doncs això, un bon sou, el seu pare li va donar un consell que l'ha acompanyat la resta de la seva vida, que era, però per què has d'acceptar, no, aquesta proposta que et fan de contractar i de sou? Si estan disposats a contractar-te i a pagar-te, vol dir que el que tu estàs fent val molt més si estan disposats a pagar-te per això. Per què no ho fas tu i així seràs el propietari de la teva creació? I bueno, resulta que aquest va ser un bon consell, no? Que anava contracorrent del que hagués estat típic a la seva època, perquè el fet de que ell conservés, no, la propietat de Karateka i de Prince of Persia com a autor i que no tingués el rol de ser només un empleat, sinó que fos el propietari, li va permetre de fer més coses, no? Com per exemple la qüestió del cinema amb Disney. O sigui que li va obrir moltes portes i que això és una cosa que li deu al consell que li va donar el seu pare. I que el seu pare, de fet, això li venia de l'instint aquest que ell tenia pel fet d'haver hagut de fugir d'Europa tan jove, de la seva experiència vital, no? Això de mantenir la llibertat i el poder, no, sobre la teva vida. El fet que la vida que ell va tenir li va fer desconfiar profundament de les decisions que els altres podien prendre sobre la seva vida i per això sempre va voler ser ell qui duia les regnes del que havia de ser la vida i clar, volien mantenir el control sobre el seu futur.
And to be fair, I have to say that for this game that we're talking about in these pages, The Last Express, my choice to keep all of the control and the ownership and to put all of my money into this project was a terrible decision. I lost all my money that I put in. And this is what often happens. But that's part of the game.
That's a price of freedom. Do we want to talk about white mice? Or
no, I think that's a spoiler.
Yeah,
because nobody raised their hand. They haven't read the book yet.
Yeah, but they know about some white mouse.
Yeah.
They know some white mouse. Yeah. Some. Okay. We're gonna leave it here. No, of course. Just I don't want to spoil it.
There's a white mouse in the book.
Actually, two.
Oh yeah.
You know better than you, man. Ok, so, si voleu fer preguntes a vosaltres mateixos, endavant, aixequeu la mà.
Yo tengo una pregunta. Fa un temps es va publicar un llibre que es deia 1001 videojuegos que jugar antes de morir. I per la meva sorpresa, diversos dels videojocs que has produït o has fet apareixien en aquest llibre. Llavors, la pregunta que et volia fer, que estic bastant convençut de que ja te la deuen haver fet moltes vegades, però de tota la teva extensa producció, The Last Express, Prince of Persia, de quin joc et sents més orgullós d'haver fet?
Some years ago, there was published a book that it was called 1001 videojuegos que tienes que ver antes de morir.
Wow.
And he would like to know.
Does that make me feel proud?
Yes, most of your games were there. Most of your games were there.
But the question is, what of your video games you feel more proud about?
Well, I think a parent loves all of their children, right? It's I mean, of the between I can't choose. I mean, The Last Express is very maybe close. It got less attention, so I feel programming it myself, because after that I worked with with bigger teams. So I feel like all of my games after Prince of Persia were really team efforts. I mean, my name might be on them, but it was the team that did it. So The Sands of Time is close to my heart because it was one of the most wonderful team experiences that I've had, and that was the thing that brought Prince of Persia back after it had basically had its first life and it was over.
The last one, which was?
The Sands of Time. So, but now I've just named 3 of them that are my favorites. They can't all be my favorites, so I'll stop there.
Doncs tots. I en realitat no puc triar. Potser The Last Express, perquè potser és el que té més carinyo, segurament perquè és el que ha rebut menys, ha tingut menys ressò, i això el fa com voler-lo protegir. Per l'altra banda també està Prince of Persia, que va ser el primer, no? I això, vulguis que no, ser el primer, i que encara és molt valorat avui i que, de fet, és el que ha fet que la resta del que va venir després doncs, fos possible, a banda de que, ostres, que el va fer tot ell sol, no? Perquè la resta, en el que va estar implicat 100% de forma pràctica, no? Amb la creació d'aquest, perquè amb la resta ja van ser amb equips. I el The Sands of Time doncs, també li té el camí, entre altres coses, perquè va permetre de retornar a Prince of Persia, però és difícil de decidir-se.
Més preguntes?
Sí. En alguna altra conferència he sentit parlar molt sobre l'inconscient, la sombra, sobretot en Prince of Persia, no? I aquest llibre parla, penso, d'una cosa que és molt important pel nostre inconscient col·lectiu. Què et fa pensar, no? Haver escrit la història de tota la teva família i, en certa manera, d'Europa i de tot Occident, què et fa pensar sobre el nostre inconscient col·lectiu?
Yeah, the shadow in Prince of Persia, and the book talks about the shadow of
in other conference she has heard you talk about the shadow and the inconscient, and that she thinks that in this book and all you have explained about your family, the collective unconscious is very present. So la pregunta exactament era?
Què pensa, després d'haver escrit tota la història de la seva família i, per tant, també d'Occident, què pensa que ens diu aquesta història o aquesta experiència del nostre inconscient col·lectiu?
After writing this work about the story of your family, of Europe and the whole world, what do you think this work tells us about the unconscious, the collective unconscious?
It's very difficult, sorry.
No, it's I mean, the shadow is I mean, of course, it's a it's a theme in the book, and the in the opening pages in the you told me the word. What's the word today? The epigraph.
The epigraph.
The epigraph of the book is a line from the poet Paul Celan, and the poem that I quoted from, "He who speaks shadow speaks truth." What that poem says is that if you say something that's positive, it's not true. You have to give your speech shadow, because everything contains its opposite. And if we hold back the dark side, then we sense that we're not getting the whole story. We sense that and I mean, to think of Europe in the 20th century or Europe now, it's we have this all this wonderful positive culture and image and art and culture and governments that take care of the people, and then we have the shadow. And in some way, the idea of Jung, is that if we suppress the shadow, if we don't want to admit that it exists, we want to pretend that everything is nice, and I think we've. I'm thinking of Pétain, the Pétain regime in France, and the positive values of travail, famille, patrie. That fascism was presented as such a positive thing, but then it's because that's only if you don't look at the dark side. I think the idea of Jung is that if we suppress. The more we suppress this shadow, this dark side, the more powerfully it will come back, and the more terrible it will be. So, I think in sharing the stories of dark things, maybe we we release some of this shadow energy, and that by confronting it and integrating it, that can give us more strength to deal with life, with the good and the bad.
Vale, l'ombra, sí, en realitat l'ombra és un dels temes del llibre. De fet, a les pàgines de l'inici hi ha un epígraf de Paul Celan d'un poema que es diu Shadow Speaks Truth. La idea és que el que vol dir ell és que tot té la seva part fosca, no? La seva ombra, i que si no la treus, si no la mostres, en realitat no estàs explicant la història completa, perquè una història no és només la part brillant, positiva, bona, sinó que també hi ha una part que és fosca, no? Pensem, per exemple, en Europa i la seva història. Podem veure en Europa la seva magnífica cultura, que hi ha un estat de benestar, que els polítics es preocupen pels seus ciutadans, les meravelloses expressions artístiques, però Europa també té una part fosca, una part que és l'ombra. I la idea de Carl Jung és que si reprimim l'ombra, si la ignorem, si pretenem que tot és bonic i ja està, ens podem trobar que aquesta ombra acabarà expressant-se de la forma més terrible possible. Pensem, per exemple, en el que deia el règim de Pétain, el règim de Vichy, que parlava de valors com la feina, el treball, costos que semblava que el feixisme tenia aspectes positius, però clar, això era només si no miraves la part fosca justament del feixisme. I que el que és important és que realment el que s'ha de fer és integrar l'ombra, aquesta part fosca, de forma que la integrem en nosaltres i que l'acceptem, la qual cosa ens donarà més força per encarar la vida.
I have a question. How was this creative process to include the animation principles in Prince of Persia? You think this at the beginning or in the process? Because these animation principles change the way the people would play. For example, the anticipation make the prince. You need to push the jump button 2 blocks before the edge, and it wasn't common at that time because for So, for example, Mario, you need to jump at the edge. And this was in the process, or at the beginning you have the idea of, okay,
So
keyframes need to have in-betweens, other keyframes.
So this is a technical question about video game animation and player control. I'll answer quickly, just in case some people are not game designers. It's technical, but the trade-off is between having realistic fluid animation, so that when you look at the screen, it feels like you're watching a real person and it looks great, and the desire that we have as a player to have the player the character respond instantly and do what you want to do. That is, if you're running in one direction and then you suddenly realize that's wrong, I want to go this other direction, and you pull the controller, ideally you want to instantly get out of there. But in real life, as I found out when I filmed my brother, if you run full tilt in one direction and then you suddenly say, now run in the other direction, it takes a long time to slow down, because you have momentum, and it's awkward and it's slow. So for Prince of Persia, I had to try to find a compromise, because if it was too responsive, then it would look fake. It would look like Mario or any platform game where the character has no weight and has no reality. But if I was too realistic, the game would be so frustrating that nobody would want to play it. So I tried to strike that balance. I'm sorry, this was maybe you don't have to translate that one. It's
Bueno, faré el que pugui, que aquesta ja...
this is a graphic novel publisher.
Vale, pues a veure, és una pregunta molt tècnica que parla de com conjuguem, no, l'aconseguir que l'animació sigui fluida i realista amb la necessitat o el desig que tenim els jugadors de que el personatge respongui de forma àgil i ràpida al que volem que faci. Com, per exemple, ara gira, te fes una patada, ara colpeja, no? Com ho conjuguem, això? I ell, treballant amb el seu germà, que era qui li servia de model per fer molts dels moviments de Prince of Persia, es va adonar que els canvis de moviment, o sigui, si tu vas corrent tot recte, de cop i volta et vols girar, que el gir en realitat es produeix d'una forma molt lenta, no? I que això presentava un problema a l'hora de fer el videojoc, perquè, per exemple, si volies que fos realista, el videojoc fos, per exemple, el Prince of Persia fos el més realista possible, resulta que els moviments eren molt frustrants pel jugador perquè eren molt lents. Però, en canvi, si volies que fos responsive, no? Vull dir, et trobaves amb que no eren prou creïbles i això, era complicat de conjugar.
Sí. Conectando con la pregunta anterior, viniendo de una industria conocida por las limitaciones técnicas, tecnológicas y presupuestarias que tiene cada juego, ¿qué limitaciones encontraste vos al hacer la novela gráfica, además de las autoimpuestas que mencionabas, que eran la rigurosidad y la fidelidad gráfica y narrativa?
Mm-hmm. Well, the limitations of my own skill as an artist, of course, because this is the first graphic novel that I've drawn as well as written. So I was worried from the beginning, like, would I be able to draw it as, would I like it? Or would I just look at the pages and be like, oh, no, it's just not going to work. It's not good enough. But luckily, gradually, I kind of increased my confidence as I went. There was one chapter, the middle chapter. The book has 9 chapters, I should say, and it's structured so that the middle chapter is special. That's my grandfather's voice speaking about his experience as a soldier in World War I. I was terrified to draw this chapter because I knew it would be at night with explosions, and I don't really know much about war or how these things work. I knew I had to do a ton of research, that it would be hard to draw, and also that there were going to be thousands of soldiers. So I was so scared of drawing that chapter that I skipped it. I went from chapter 4 to chapter 6, and I said, I'll come back and draw chapter 5 later. But I got more practice drawing night scenes and using black. And by the time I got back to it, I was able to do it. And in fact, by the end of the book, I felt like my drawing style had evolved. So then I went back and I redrew a lot of the pages that I'd drawn in chapter 1.
Bueno, pues las limitaciones con las que se encontró fueron, bueno, pues sus limitaciones y sus habilidades, capacidades artísticas. Piensa que esta es la primera novela gráfica que hace como autor completo. O sea, en las otras había hecho el guión, pero en esta ha hecho el guión y el dibujo. Y no sabia si conseguiria dibuixar tal com... mirar el resultat del dibuix tal com ell desitjava que fos, no? I el que va necessitar era doncs, que la seva confiança creixés. De fet, el llibre té 9 capítols i el del mig li feia pànic enfrontar-lo. És el capítol en què explica l'experiència del seu avi a la Primera Guerra Mundial i és un capítol en el que passa la major part a la nit, a les fosques, amb explosions, i ell no sabia gaire com dibuixar tot això, es va documentar moltíssim, però bueno, es va capficar molt amb això i al final se'l va saltar, no? Va passar de l'episodi 4, del capítol 4 al 6 per deixar-lo més endavant, i en capítols posteriors doncs, hi havia altres escenes nocturnes i això li va permetre practicar, no? I de fet, quan es va acabar el llibre, cap al final del llibre, ell creu poder apreciar com el seu dibuix ha millorat respecte del principi del llibre i per això va redibuixar moltes de les pàgines, algunes de les pàgines de l'inici per ajustar-les a l'estil del final, l'estil gràfic del final.
Hi havia una paraula per allà, sí.
As the creator of Prince of Persia, are you still involved, like actively involved in the development of the latest games, or have you been working more like a creative consultant, or none of the above?
So the last Prince of Persia game that shipped, that I was deeply involved in, was The Sands of Time. But if you read Replay, you will know that there was a Prince of Persia project, or rather two, that I was deeply involved in just a few years ago. And this was never announced, but in Replay, it tells the untold story of that a little bit. But the short answer is that The Lost Crown, which released this year, which is wonderful, by the way. I recommend everybody to play The Lost Crown. It's a young team in Montpellier, and it's no coincidence that Montpellier is the city that I moved to, because there's a team there that really wanted to make this Prince of Persia game, and although we didn't get to do it the way we wanted to with the project mentioned in the book, some members of the team then went on to form the group that made The Lost Crown. So there is definitely a continuity, and also some of the research and ideas and preparation that were done for previous Prince of Persia games have found their way into the new one. So in a way, The Lost Crown is the happy ending and the sequel to Replay.
Thank you.
Prince of Persia.
Well, The Lost Crown is definitely the new Prince of Persia game, but I say it's the sequel to Replay in the sense that after you finish reading Replay, you understand that this created the conditions in which The Lost Crown could be made.
Well.
Maybe translation is not necessary for this one.
Next question. Okay, aquí n'hi havia i al final un altre.
Els videojocs evidentment es facin amb ordinador i també dic que escrius un diari que entenc que serà a mà. Com dibuixes? Dibuixes en tradicional o en digital?
Did I draw it on ink or by digital? Yeah. So I learned my way of drawing. I draw in sketchbooks. I draw from life, and I draw directly with pen on paper, without pencil. And this is just how I started drawing, like as practice. And I filled, maybe 40 sketchbooks this way. And so for Replay, I wanted to try to capture the style of the sketchbook. But of course, for a comics page, it's I can't draw a complete page like that, and get it right the first time. So my first idea was that I would draw with pen on paper, I would scan it, and then I would import it into Procreate. And then if there had to be adjustments like this, I have to redraw this panel 5 times. then I would draw next to it, in Procreate. And if I couldn't tell which was real and which was digital, it was okay. So that's how I started.
Bueno, ell dibuixa molt a mà, no? I dibuixa molt sketchbooks, dibuix del natural, té com 40 quaderns de dibuix, i amb Replay ell el que volia era que el dibuix tingués un estil que s'assemblés molt al del seu dibuix a mà amb els sketchbooks, amb els quaderns de dibuix. Llavors, la seva primera idea, el que ell tenia pensat fer era dibuixar amb paper i a llapis a mà, després escanejar i amb Procreate i passar-ho a Procreate. No? Procreate és un programa que fan servir els dibuixants per dibuixar tal, i amb el programa fer els canvis i ajustos. I llavors el que va crear va ser un llapis a Procreate que intentava, que amb el que tenia que aconseguir poder imitar per fer en digital amb el que ell feia a mà, no? I llavors, ho va fer, va imprimir, va comparar, no? I va mirar que el resultat funcionava.
Yeah, so because I wanted the book to look hand-drawn. I didn't want anything to show that it was done digitally. So that's how I started. But as I worked, I became more and more comfortable with Procreate to the point where I actually started to draw panels directly in Procreate, and I thought the results still looked good. So in fact, most of the book was drawn in Procreate. You can't tell, I think, which ones were drawn in ink and scan. And then, of course, the color layers I added directly in Procreate. The other great thing about Procreate is that I could put in the text in my handwriting, and then also in the typewriter font for my grandfather's memoirs, because there I used an old typewriter font so that you can see at a glance, when it's my grandfather's voice speaking. But the trick, I think the danger of using a tool like Procreate is that it's so powerful that the temptation is to use the feature, like, for example, to zoom in and make something perfect and add more detail. But then when I would zoom out, I would realize I couldn't have drawn that with a pen. It's impossible. So the discipline is to only use a few of the features of Procreate, so that you don't do something that's better or more perfect than you could do by hand. So a lot of times I would spend like 20 minutes doing a drawing in Procreate, and then I would look at it and go, no, that's too good. It ruins everything. I erase it and start over and just draw something more honest of like, this is really the best that I could have done with ink. And that way the book has a consistent look.
De fet, el que volia és que el llibre semblés fet a mà. A mesura que anava treballant en Procreate, es va anar sentint cada cop més còmode fent-lo servir, i al final ja es va decidir de fer-lo directament amb aquest programa. I si et mires el llibre, en realitat seria molt difícil poder identificar quines són les vinyetes que han estat fetes a mà i quines són les vinyetes que han estat fetes amb Procreate. Això pel que fa al dibuix, perquè llavors el color, sí que les capes de color sí que estan fetes directament en digital. A més, aquest programa també li va permetre fer de la seva lletra una font digitalitzada per fer la part del rotulat. Però què passa? Que Procreate també té un perill, que és una eina tan potent que la veritat és que costa resistir-se a la tentació de fer zoom i fer imatges molt petites, dibuixos molt petits, perfectes, que això seria impossible d'aconseguir fet manual justament perquè són imatges, dibuixos molt petits. Llavors ells es trobaven que a vegades li passava això i deia, ostres, això és que està molt més ben fet del que realment materialment hagués pogut fer amb la realitat, i que llavors que feia que ho esborrava i feia marxa enrere. O sigui, no volia que l'ús del programa li fes aconseguir imatges que fossin impossibles o dibuixos de qualitat dels quals fos impossible d'aconseguir de forma analògica.
One question related to this: the writing we see here is your handwriting. In the translation, how did you manage that? Okay, so I don't know if there's any comic artists here. It's technical again, but I actually, this is embarrassing. I
I lettered the whole book by hand in English. By the way, it was published first in French, but I wrote it first in English, my mother tongue. And I actually, I was never happy with the way that the lettering in Procreate looked. I could, like, for some reason, the drawings looked fine, but my handwriting looked like I'd drawn it on the screen.
Yeah.
So I wrote all the dialogue for the book in pen on paper, and then I scanned it, and I imported each bubble of dialogue, and so I have a folder this thick, and because every time that I changed the dialogue line, I had to write it again on paper, I had to scan it again and import it, and then I had to change the bubble to fit. So I have a folder like maybe 500 pages of handwritten dialogue in English, which, so I did this, and then the publisher said, we want to do this with a font. We can make a font based on your handwriting, and that way we can make the corrections. And I said, no, it's never going to look good enough. I want it to really look handwritten. I want this to look like my sketchbook. So just tell me the corrections to make, and I'll make it by hand. And they pushed back. This is my American publisher. They said, we really want to do a font, and we'll pay for it. We have a guy who makes fonts based on handwriting. Like, wait till you see what he can do. And you can use this font for all of the foreign editions as well. Do you really want to have to rewrite all of these bubbles when you do the book in Spanish? And so I worked with this guy. I never met him, but he just makes fonts based on artists' handwriting. And he had me write a bunch of samples. Well, this is what you see in the book.
Amazing work.
I mean, it looks, when I saw it, because, there's different combinations of letters. When I put two T's together, I make one line for the two T's. Yeah. It's not like the letter T repeated twice. Well, the font takes all of this into account, all of the different combinations. So I was impressed. And
amazing work.
Yeah, but the thing is that then I had to go back and I had to retype all of the all of the dialogue into Procreate with the font so that they could print the final version. But it paid off because now we have a Spanish edition, and it was completely painless. Somehow you did it without the first time I saw it was when it was finished. So they were right.
Bueno, el tema de...
Did you have to? Yeah.
Sí, això ho explico perquè és una curiositat. Una cosa molt important en el còmic és el retolat, no? I ell explica que, que a ell no li agradava com quedava el retolat, és la forma de les lletres dins de les bafarades, que a més es considera dibuix també, no es considera text. Llavors, primer va fer l'edició en francès i llavors va sortir l'edició americana, no? I a ell no li havia agradat com havia quedat la seva lletra amb el Procreate i va dir que l'edició en anglès, la traducció en anglès, la retolava tota a mà. Llavors volia dir que el que havia de fer era en pàgines la part de que serien les bafarades, posar allà el text, escanejar-ho i importar-ho al programa i llavors integrar-ho dins de cada bafarada. Això són 300 pàgines i escaig, vull dir, és una estoneta. Llavors, quan portava no sé quantes pàgines fetes, però ja bastantes, ho va enviar al seu editor nord-americà, que li va dir, hem encarregat a una persona la font. La font és la font digital, o sigui, es creen l'abecedari per cada llengua de les lletres imitant l'estil del dibuixant. I a més, ara ho explicaré. I va dir, no, jo no vull una font, passeu-me les correccions que s'han de fer i ja les faig jo a mà i tal. I el seu editor nord-americà va insistir amb el tema de la font i al final li van passar i quan ell va veure el resultat de la font que havia creat ja persones especialitzades en dedicar-se a crear fonts que no només havien imitat cadascuna de les seves lletres, sinó les diferents combinacions. Tu pots dibuixar la T d'una manera si va sola o la dibuixes d'una altra manera si van dues juntes o si és al principi de paraula o si és al final. Quan va veure el resultat, va trobar que era espectacular. Es va quedar com... Déu meu, això és meravellós, no? I bueno, doncs va acceptar, no, la creació d'aquesta font, que de fet és la que s'ha utilitzat també per retolar el còmic en l'edició en castellà, i res, només va haver de retolar tot el còmic en anglès amb la font digital.
Hi havia alguna pregunta per allà al final? Sí, al final.
Yes. You spoke before about how technology can be tempting, no? To create this thing. Have you been tempted to go back to your roots and develop a game on your own again? Because technology today makes it very accessible, no? You don't have the memory limitations that you wouldn't have to deal with assembly language from the Apple tool, for instance. So with today's tools, have you been tempted to try to develop a game on your own or with a very small team as you used to?
Yeah, so, it's funny, but although I loved programming, when I did it, I think it was always a means to an end for me. Like, I really wanted to make the game. When I was 13, 14, and I saw the computer and wow, I want to do this. Like, I just wanted to make the game, and programming was a way to do it. I enjoyed it. I liked the challenge. Like, there's an elegance, and I loved programming. But after Prince of Persia, I kind of turned the page, and then everything I did after that was working with teams. And I never programmed again, and I didn't. I haven't really missed it. I think it's like other things that I did at one point in my life, and then that was fine. I think the thing that really mattered to me was to tell the story, to create an experience for the players, and if I could do that programming, that was great. But if I could also do it by leading a team, that was good too. Drawing, like right now for me, it's just purely like it's pleasure. When I take out my sketchbook and I draw, like in the metro, it's just a moment of relax. And I think that's kind of the pleasure that I got from drawing when I was a kid, and then it was the same pleasure that I got from programming. But I don't feel the urge to program again for whatever reason. I haven't missed it.
With today's tools, you don't even need to code. I mean, I'm a developer, and I don't know how to code, but I
imagine. I've looked over programmers' shoulders enough. I know that now, like when you code, it all turns into the correct different colors, and it tells you if you've made a mistake. You've got AI that can suggest variation, and of course you're not doing it in machine language. It's all it's all going to be compiled or interpreted several levels down. So it's it's like I made an airplane with like rubber and glue, and now like you've got this incredible Airbus thing. Yeah.
Hauríem de tancar la presentació perquè si no donarà temps de
signar els llibres.
Sí.
Okay, well, I think we can leave it here. Thank you very much. We'll be waiting for the movie. I think make a great movie. Video game. I think it makes a better movie. Anyway, si voleu signar. No sé, això ara la cerimònia el reges tu.
Parlin. Crec que el que faria és... Hauria de posar la... Carme, pots dir la nòvia de la Victòria que posi?
La signatura? No sé.
Ara us diem com és el...
Fugir ella, la llibretera?
Sí, perquè ens digui
Can
com
sign
ho
it for
fem.
me. The right time.
Porque yo presentaba la mirada para centrarse en alguien mientras iba hablando.
Sí, ara us diem com és la logística.
Si las compañías me han limitado alguna vez en desarrollar lo que quieren. Hay unos países tuyos que no, lo que primero le hiciste tú con un pequeño equipo, pero era tuyo. En el momento que haces Sandro Stein, no has podido hacer aquello que querías. Sí, sí, o sea, sí, sí. Cualquier cosa que pasara que uno. No puede dar muy del libre. Primero es decir, ¿hasta qué punto, aunque es un millón, una Ubisoft de la vida no te dice, no, esto no, o esto, claro, claro. Ya, sí, iba con eso. Tu Prince of Persia primero sí que es verdad que lo gestionas tú, pero en el momento que ya pasas a una gran compañía, ¿hasta qué punto tienes el control de tu propio proceso?
Bueno, pero ahí está.
Okay, great.
Maybe they're here and maybe.
Yo sé pasar de mano. Pero muy currado, pero muy currado. Lindo.
Yeah.